Hi. My name is Tamira Knox. My parents didn't just throw away my asthma medication. They threw away my autonomy, one gaslight at a time. They lived in my house, threw parties I wasn't invited to, told the world I was unstable. And then tried to steal the deed right out from under me. They called it love. I called it theft. So I did the only thing left to do. I changed the locks. But here's what no one saw coming. What they really tried to take wasn't my house. It was my name. And I have to ask. What would you do if the people who raised you started rewriting your life like it was theirs to claim? The sun slipped through the blinds in my bedroom, slicing the walls into bands of gold and shadow. The ocean was quiet that morning, the kind of stillness that makes you think the world's holding its breath. I swung my legs off the bed, the wood floor cool beneath my feet, and reached for my inhaler on the nightstand. The pill organizer sat beside it, exactly where I left it last night, or so I thought. When I picked it up, the weight was wrong. It was empty. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the open compartments, thinking maybe I'd refilled it and forgotten. But my brain was too sharp for that kind of mistake. I checked the bathroom counter, then the drawer beneath the sink, then the shelf near the mirror where I kept backups. Nothing. My chest gave a little warning flutter, just a whisper at first, the kind that tells you your lungs are losing patience. I moved through each room, opening drawers, pulling cushions off the couch, searching like a woman who's misplaced her past. The house was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the ocean outside, each wave hitting the shore with a measured kind of calm that mocked my panic. Then, in the kitchen trash, I saw it. My pill organizer, lid open, sitting on top of a layer of coffee grounds and eggshells. Empty. My mother's voice floated in from the deck. "You're up early, sweetheart." I picked up the box carefully, like it might explode. "Did you throw this away?" Sheila turned, smiling in that calm, teacherly way she always had. "Oh, that thing. I was cleaning the counters. Must have fallen in." "You're welcome, by the way, the kitchen looks great." My father was at the breakfast bar, reading his tablet. Without looking up, he said, "You don't need half that junk anyway. You'd feel better if you got some sun, did a few laps in the pool." I held the box tighter. "You threw away my medication." Mom's smile thinned. "Tamira, don't overreact. It was an accident. You're always so sensitive." That word. Sensitive. It cut through me like sandpaper. I wanted to scream, but instead, I heard myself say softly, "You've been taking my breath since I was a kid. You just found a new way to do it." Sheila blinked, confused, maybe pretending not to understand. Gareth folded his paper. "Jesus, Tamira, it's a couple pills. You're not dying." I stepped back, feeling the air tighten. They were both watching me now, waiting for the show. I turned toward the sliding door and walked outside. The sea wind hit my face, sharp, cold, grounding. I braced my hands on the railing and tried to inhale slowly, the way the doctor taught me. Count 4 in, hold for 2, exhale 6. The rhythm steadied me, but underneath it was that old, ugly fear that never really left. The ocean blurred, and suddenly I was 10 years old again. It was summer in Pensacola, the Navy base housing so close to the runway that the windows rattled when planes landed. I remember the smell of salt and engine oil. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, wheezing, the inhaler empty. "Dad," I called out, "I can't breathe." He didn't look up from polishing his metals. "You can breathe enough to talk. You're fine." Mom stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You just need to calm down, baby. You get yourself worked up and make it worse." The walls felt smaller with every second. My vision spotted at the edges. Please, I whispered. She sighed, like I was being inconvenient. You have to stop this, Tamira. People will think we spoil you. When I finally passed out, it wasn't the asthma that scared me, it was knowing that no one was coming. Back in the present, I pressed my palms against the railing. The sea air filled my lungs, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like memory. I still hid my medication in different rooms, tucked away like contraband. Even here, in the house I'd bought with my own money, the reflex hadn't gone away. When I went back inside, my parents were still at the table. Mom was cutting fruit. Dad scrolled through the news, pretending nothing had happened. I set the empty box down between them. This wasn't an accident. You knew exactly what it was. Sheila didn't look up. You're making something out of nothing. Honestly, Tamira, you've always been dramatic. Dad snorted. If you'd run a mile every morning instead of sitting behind that laptop, you wouldn't need all these chemicals. I kept my voice level. You've said that before. Because it's true, he said, finally looking at me. You don't need medicine. You need discipline. For a moment, the room seemed to shrink again. I could hear the echo of that base housing kitchen, the same tone, the same dismissal. But this time, I didn't collapse under it. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and set it on the counter. Let's make sure I get this right, I said quietly. You're saying my asthma isn't real? Dad's brows rose. Are you recording us? I am. Tamira, Mom warned, that's unnecessary. Maybe, I said, picking up the phone again, but necessary is relative, isn't it? They looked at each other, silent for the first time. I turned and walked toward the deck again, letting the door click shut behind me. Outside, the world was bright, too bright. The ocean glimmered like a sheet of glass. I leaned on the railing, breathing carefully. It wasn't just the missing pills that scared me, it was how normal it felt for them to decide what I did or didn't need. I called my doctor from the steps, scheduling an urgent refill. My voice was steady, but inside, something had shifted. I wasn't panicking anymore. I was planning. When I hung up, I stared out at the horizon, watching a sailboat drift by, a white triangle against the blue. My mother's laughter carried faintly from inside. I thought about the child who'd begged for air and the woman now standing on her own balcony, still asking permission to breathe. That child deserved better. I took another slow breath, my hand tightening around the railing until the wood creaked. This time, I whispered to no one in particular, I won't just breathe quietly. The wind picked up, scattering the scent of salt and lemons from the trees below. Somewhere inside, a door shut. Maybe it was theirs. Maybe it was mine. If they could throw away my medicine, what else would they feel entitled to destroy? The ocean didn't answer. It only hissed against the rocks, like a warning I could finally hear. That evening, as the sky turned the color of bruised lavender over the Pacific, I stood in the hallway outside the living room, watching my mother adjust a framed photograph above the fireplace. It wasn't one I recognized, at least not from my life. It showed the four of us, posed in front of the beach house like a glossy real estate brochure, Gareth with his arms crossed, Sheila smiling wide, Thane holding his son. And me, off to the side, expression unreadable, the kind of person who had to be reminded to smile. Sheila stepped back, tilting her head. Looks more balanced now, don't you think? I didn't answer. I was too focused on what Gareth was saying in the next room, phone pressed to his ear, pacing slowly along the kitchen island. She's doing really well. Numbers are strong, clients are responding, he said. And once we get the paperwork sorted, the place will be under the family trust. Keeps it clean for inheritance, tax-wise. There it was. The confirmation I hadn't wanted, but already expected. They weren't guests. They were preparing a takeover. I didn't confront them that night. I couldn't, not without exploding. Instead, I walked to my room and pulled the door shut, carefully, quietly. I sat on the edge of my bed and let my thoughts unspool like thread unraveling from a torn seam. The next morning, I woke up early, dressed in silence, and drove to the office. I didn't say goodbye. A month earlier, I'd returned home from a pitch meeting in San Jose. I'd closed a deal with one of the top interior design platforms in California, my largest private client to date. Exhausted but proud, I'd picked up a chilled bottle of Prosecco and 2 packs of their favorite mineral water from the little Italian grocer on Ortega Ridge. Pulling into the driveway, I saw unfamiliar cars parked out front. 2 SUVs, a sleek silver convertible, and a boxy white van. I assumed it was maintenance work or maybe Gareth had scheduled something without telling me. When I opened the front door, the scent of grilled seafood and lemon butter hit me first. Then I heard laughter, half a dozen voices, overlapping and loud. I stepped out onto the back patio and stopped. My parents were hosting a luncheon for friends. A white canopy tent was set up over the lounge area I had designed. My teak furniture, the cushions I'd special ordered from a designer in Charleston, the planters I'd arranged, everything was being used for a party I didn't even know about. Gareth stood at the grill, flipping tuna steaks like a practiced showman. Sheila was pouring glasses of white wine, smiling as she gestured toward the house. "Well, we always wanted a place by the sea," she said to a woman in a wide-brimmed hat. "We finally have it. Took long enough, but here we are." I stood there, still holding the bag of drinks, invisible. When she noticed me, Sheila's face lit up like I'd wandered into my own surprise party. "Tamira. Everyone, this is our baby girl, she helps with the paperwork for the business." Paperwork. That word sat in my stomach like a stone. I nodded to the guests politely and turned to walk back inside. I placed the mineral water in the fridge and poured myself a glass. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the counter. I reminded myself to breathe. Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the day I signed the closing documents on this house. 2 years earlier. The real estate office had smelled like lavender and printer ink. The agent congratulated me with practiced cheer, handed me the keys, and asked if someone was meeting me to celebrate. I'd said no. I took a photo in the parking lot, keys in hand, smiling softly. I sent it to our family group chat. "It's done. I did it." 3 hours passed. Then, a text from Gareth. "Wow. Someone's growing up." A thumbs up emoji from Sheila. Thane said nothing. Back in the present, I rolled over and reached for my phone. I opened Facebook. There it was. A post from Sheila, "Knox family summer bash, nothing better than family and sunshine." Dozens of photos. Gareth manning the grill. Sheila smiling next to her friends. Thane giving a toast, glass held high. My guest room, now made up with different linens, featured in the background of several photos. I wasn't in a single frame. I wasn't even mentioned. I had been in San Diego that weekend, delivering a keynote at a conference. My absence wasn't just expected, it had been strategically useful. The caption on the photo read, "Home is where the family roots run deepest." I stared at that line for a long time. The next morning, I waited until breakfast was over. I placed my phone on the table and pulled up the post. "Did you need permission to use my house for this?" I asked. Gareth chuckled, reaching for more coffee. "Don't be dramatic. We cleaned up afterward." Sheila folded her napkin neatly. "You weren't using it. And it's the family home. You wouldn't deny everyone a bit of joy, would you? I looked at them both. You didn't ask. You didn't even tell me. Tamira, Sheila said softly, you're always so touchy. It's not a crime to gather family. It is when it's in a space you don't own, I replied. She smiled. Don't be petty. It's everyone's house, isn't it? I didn't answer. I stood, took my phone, and stepped outside. The deck was still littered with candle wax drippings and faint wine stains. The cushions smelled like sunscreen and perfume I didn't recognize. I looked out at the cliffside, where the edge of my property met the ocean, and I whispered to myself, not anymore. It wasn't everyone's house. It was mine. And they were about to learn the difference. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying Garrett's words, the calm way he'd said, family trust, as if I wasn't standing 10 feet away. The house creaked under the cool breeze from the ocean, and every sound reminded me that I had built this place, chosen every nail, every tile, every color on the walls. Yet somehow, my name already sounded like a footnote in their conversations. By late afternoon the next day, I convinced myself to try again. Maybe I'd been too defensive. Maybe if I softened my tone, if I met them halfway, things could feel like family again. I went to the market, bought filet mignon, potatoes, and Sheila's favorite bottle of Chardonnay. I cooked quietly, letting the rhythm of slicing and stirring settle me down. The house smelled like rosemary and butter when they came in. Garrett sniffed the air and smiled. Looks like someone's making peace. I forced a smile. Thought we could have a nice dinner. Just the three of us. We ate in the dining room, the one with the large windows facing the sea. The light was fading, the sky turning gold at the edges. They both seemed relaxed, chatting about a friend's golf trip and how the local paper might run a feature on Garrett's retirement lifestyle. When the plates were nearly empty, I set my fork down. I'd like to talk about boundaries, I said. Garrett glanced up. Boundaries? Yes, I said carefully. This house. My health. Decisions about my life. I just want us to. He cut me off with a short laugh. There she goes again. The victim monologue. Sheila's voice was smooth, almost kind. Sweetheart, you should be grateful. Most people your age can't even afford a closet here. The words hit me harder than I expected. I'd spent years working 12-hour days, managing clients, building something from scratch. I bought them filet mignon, and they fed me shame. I leaned back, pushing the plate slightly away. I'm not ungrateful. I just want respect. Gareth chuckled. Respect goes both ways, Tamira. You think buying a house means you can lecture us on how to live? Sheila reached for her wineglass. You've always been dramatic when you feel cornered. I stood up slowly. You know what's dramatic? Having your medication thrown away and being told it's in your head. That's dramatic. Silence stretched across the table. Garrett's jaw tightened. You're still on about that. We said it was an accident. I nodded. Sure. Let's call it that. I carried my plate to the sink, washed it in steady circles, the water running louder than their silence behind me. The evening air outside looked calm, but something inside me had shifted. I realized the peace I'd been chasing wasn't peace at all, it was permission. 2 weeks earlier, I'd found myself in the urgent care center, wheezing and lightheaded. The doctor was kind, efficient. He adjusted my dosage and reminded me to avoid stress. I paid the bill on my own insurance card, $6,000, between medication and the overnight observation they'd insisted on. When I came home, I left the folded receipt on the kitchen counter, next to a note that read, "Proof that this is real." That evening, Gareth held the paper up between 2 fingers. $6,000. Did they give you a new lung? Sheila shook her head, setting down her teacup. Honey, you've always been a bit dramatic with pain. You let your nerves take over. I watched them both from the doorway. They believed pain was a plea, not a fact. That memory pressed against me now, the same way it had pressed against my ribs that night in the ER. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds, the sea glittering outside my window. I went downstairs to make coffee, the smell of toast already in the air. My parents were in the kitchen, their voices low. At first, I didn't realize they were on speakerphone with Thane. I paused by the hallway wall, invisible. She's ungrateful, Thane, Sheila said, her voice honeyed but firm. We raised her. We're giving her a home, and she acts like a stranger. Gareth grunted. Exactly. We gave her everything. And now she wants a contract just to use the kitchen. I gripped the edge of the wall, my pulse sharp in my ears. They didn't see what I gave them, only what I hadn't surrendered. She needs to learn, Sheila continued. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. Thane's muffled voice came through, unsure. Maybe she just wants to feel independent. She already is, Gareth said. We're the ones walking on eggshells in her house. Her house. The words almost made me laugh. I stepped quietly back toward my office, the one overlooking the cliff. My hands were trembling, but my mind wasn't. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and brought up the shared family calendar, the one where Sheila scheduled lunches, dinners, events that filled my weekends. I deleted it. Then I opened the home automation app. With one swipe, I revoked every shared access code. No more shared thermostats, cameras, lighting controls. The house recognized one owner now, me. The silence in the room felt different, heavier but cleaner. I leaned back in my chair, watching the seagulls cut through the sky. Maybe being the ungrateful daughter wasn't the worst thing in the world. Maybe that label was freedom disguised as insult. If being grateful meant surrendering my name from the deed, then maybe it was time to be the villain. I drafted a short message in the family group chat. I'll be reviewing all access to the property this week. Please direct future requests through email. It was simple, factual, polite. 10 seconds later, my phone pinged. Sheila replied, Wow. You've really changed, Tamira. I stared at the message for a moment before setting the phone face down on the desk. My reflection caught faintly in the window glass, the waves rolling behind it. No. I hadn't changed. I was finally showing them the version they tried to erase. The email came in the middle of a Tuesday. I was at the county registrar's office to sign off on a zoning permit for a duplex I'd been converting near Montecito. It was supposed to be quick, just a signature and a notary stamp, but while the clerk typed in my last name, she paused. Knox? Related to the folks out on Shoreline Drive. I blinked. Yes. That's me. She smiled, looking at her monitor. Looks like the Knox family's estate is getting consolidated. Exciting stuff. My stomach dropped. I asked, carefully, what do you mean consolidated? Oh, someone filed a petition to reclassify the property as part of a family trust. The paperwork's all here, name matches the deed, address lines up, family cohabiting. Pretty typical setup for estate planning. I nodded slowly, throat tightening. Who filed it? She scrolled again. Gareth Knox. Filed last week. I left the building without finishing the paperwork. I don't remember walking to my car. I just remember the heat of the steering wheel, my palms slick with sweat as I gripped it tighter than I should have. They weren't just planning to take control. They had already started. Behind my back. Using my name, my house, my life. 15 minutes later, I was in my attorney's office. I told him everything, my voice low, even, maybe a little too calm. He pulled up the documents. They filed under a good faith clause, he explained. There's a California statute that allows elder family members to request joint management of shared property if there's evidence the property has been gifted, co-financed, or cohabited long-term. But I never gifted it. I never co-financed it. They moved in. He nodded. Yes, but they used old family photos, power bills in Gareth's name, even a letter from your brother vouching that this was always intended to be a family property. I stared at him. They forged it. He didn't answer directly. We can challenge it. But it's messy. You'll need to be aggressive. You sure you're ready for that? I nodded. I'm not scared of messy anymore. I spent the next 3 days gathering everything, purchase agreements, bank transfers, old emails, text logs. I cataloged every receipt, date-stamped photo, and written note that proved I bought that house on my own. On Thursday evening, just before sunset, I got a text from Eula. They're planning a dinner. At Oakstone. 7 p.m. Friday. You're not on the invite. Oakstone was a fancy steakhouse on the edge of town. White tablecloths, imported wine list, the kind of place Gareth called old money with new polish. Friday night, I parked my car 2 blocks down and walked. I didn't dress up. No makeup, no statement jewelry. Just a black turtleneck and flats. I wanted to see them as they were, unfiltered, unguarded. When I walked in, the hostess asked, "Do you have a reservation?" I pointed to the back corner. "I'm with the Knox party." She hesitated. "They've already been seated." "I know." She stepped aside. I crossed the floor quietly, weaving between couples, a few birthday parties, and a table of silver-haired women drinking champagne like they earned it. I saw them before they saw me. Gareth, Sheila, Thane, his wife Danielle, and their 2 kids. Dessert had already been served, chocolate soufflé and espresso. Thane was mid-laugh when he looked up and froze. "Tamira." His voice cracked the hum of the table. Everyone turned. The air shifted. I slid into the empty chair beside him. Didn't want to miss the family meeting. Sheila smiled with that familiar tightness. "We didn't think you'd want to be part of this." I looked at her. "You're planning my financial future without me. I figured I should be here for that." Danielle stared down at her plate. The kids didn't say a word. Gareth cleared his throat. "No one's planning anything behind your back. This is just a conversation. About a house I bought." "It's not that simple," he said, reaching for his water glass. "You live in it, but we've made it a home. We've all contributed in our own way. We thought a trust would formalize that." I didn't answer. I just turned on my phone's voice recorder and set it next to my fork. "You recording this?" Thane asked, eyes wide. "Yes," I said, "and I'll be keeping a copy." They spent the rest of the dinner talking around me. I didn't say a word. Just listened. Occasionally took a sip of water. Gareth brought up how generous it would be to split responsibilities for the home. Sheila suggested that Tamira might feel less overwhelmed if she wasn't managing everything alone. Thane offered to help review documents, though he never once looked me in the eye. When the check came, Gareth paid without blinking. The kids disappeared to the restroom with Danielle. Sheila reached for her coat, then leaned in close as we exited through the front. "You know, Tamira," she whispered, her perfume cloying and sweet, "we're just doing what's best for the family." I stopped just outside the door. The valet stand glowed with string lights. Across the street, a jazz trio was playing under a restaurant's patio awning. I turned to face her. Then the family better be ready to lose. She blinked, and for the first time, her mouth didn't know where to go. The guests didn't clap. They didn't laugh. They didn't say a word. The music that had been playing from the Bluetooth speakers cut off mid-song when my phone connected to the system as I snapped that photo. One quiet shutter click, and the whole party lost its rhythm. I walked back into the house slowly, steady, each footstep measured, like I was claiming territory no one had invited me to. Except it was mine. Every square foot, every inch of wood beneath my feet, paid for, designed, and maintained by me. Sheila followed me into the kitchen with a glass of sparkling water, holding it out like peace. Tamira, sweetie, can we not do this right now? I looked at her. You're absolutely right. That's why it won't happen again. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I sent the photo to my lawyer, added a short caption, unauthorized event on private property, documented. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't take a plate. I just walked upstairs. In my room, the scent was wrong. The sheets were wrinkled, the closet door ajar. On the back of my desk chair, a silk scarf was draped carelessly, the kind of thing Sheila wore on her spa days. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I opened my laptop, logged into the security system, and began changing everything: codes, locks, access levels. The system let me know which devices were currently connected. 6 smartphones, 3 tablets, and 2 smartwatches. All of them tied to my parents, Thane and Danielle. I wiped them all. By the time I returned downstairs, most of the guests had left. A few awkward goodbyes were exchanged by the front door. Gareth stood near the fireplace, his arms folded. You always did love ruining moments, he said, loud enough for the rest of the room to hear. I turned to face him. Then you'll hate what's coming next. That night, I stayed up late, combing through my financials. I had created a buffer years ago for emergencies, a second credit card, connected to a limited access account, one I'd given my parents permission to use when they moved in, just in case they needed groceries or gas. I hadn't thought about it since. But there it was, listed in my statements, a $25,000 charge to Pacific Horizon Cruises. Dated 3 days after the dinner at Oakstone. Sheila had told me, we're just taking a break, emotionally. They didn't take a break. They took a prize trip. On my dime. My mouth went dry as I stared at the screen. Flights, luxury suite upgrades, champagne service. They'd used the account like it belonged to them, because, in their minds, it did. I immediately called the credit card company, canceled the card, and flagged the charges for documentation. Then I called my lawyer again. Tamira, he said gently, this is enough to justify immediate revocation of financial access. But if you want to escalate, really escalate, you need to make sure every lock is changed, physically and digitally. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Already started. The next morning, I left early to drive down to a property development site. We were breaking ground on a mixed-use renovation in Goleta, and I needed a day surrounded by concrete and plans instead of birthday banners and legal traps. On the drive back that afternoon, just after passing the roundabout near Butterfly Beach, my phone buzzed with a photo message from a former client. It was my house. My deck. My view. The caption read, "Saw this on Instagram. Congrats on hosting the Knox party again." My hands tightened on the wheel. I pulled over at the first gas station, opened the app, and scrolled. Thane's wife had posted it, photos from the event, all bright and cheery. Streamers, balloons, a catering spread I hadn't approved. In one photo, my father was standing on the edge of the deck, arms raised like a toast. The caption, "Knox Legacy Continues." I hadn't been invited. Again. When I pulled into my driveway 20 minutes later, extra cars were still parked along the curb. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the house. I didn't bother to honk or text. I walked straight up to the front door and let myself in. The foyer buzzed with soft conversation and background music. People I hadn't seen in years milled about with glasses in hand, laughing in my kitchen, posing for photos on my stairs. A woman I vaguely remembered from one of Garrett's retirement parties turned, saw me, and smiled. "Oh. You made it. I thought you were still in Seattle." I didn't answer. I just walked past her, straight through the house and up the stairs to my bedroom. The bed hadn't been made. The pillows were dented, lipstick smudged on one of the pillowcases. There was a half-empty glass of wine on my nightstand. I didn't touch it. Downstairs, I heard Sheila's voice float upward, light and cheerful. We didn't want to bother her. She's been so busy lately, traveling and all. Busy enough to be erased. I walked back down the stairs and stood just inside the living room. The music dipped. Heads turned. Sheila came toward me, quick and smooth, whispering fast. "Not now, Tamira. Don't make this about you." I didn't reply. I lifted my phone, aimed it at the crowd, and took a single photo. Then I emailed it, straight to my lawyer. Subject line, "Final warning." Then, calmly, I spoke. "This will be the last event anyone hosts here without my permission." Gareth turned from the bar. "You're making a scene." "No," I said, "you're trespassing." The music stopped entirely. One by one, the guests excused themselves. Nobody argued. Nobody asked questions. Because deep down, they all knew this house didn't belong to them. I watched as they filed out, murmuring apologies, avoiding my eyes. Garrett slammed the door behind the last person, muttering something under his breath I didn't catch. The house was finally quiet. But the locks were about to change. And this time, so was everything else. By the time the last guest's car rolled away and the echo of the slamming door faded, I already knew what I had to do. This wasn't about boundaries anymore. It wasn't about dinner conversations or misused credit cards or whose name was on the Wi-Fi bill. It was about reclaiming the oxygen in my own life, without asking permission to breathe. The next morning, I was in my lawyer's office before his assistant finished her first cup of coffee. He was reviewing notes on his tablet when I walked in. I didn't sit. I handed him the folder I'd put together at 3 a.m., screenshots, receipts, that party photo with the caption about Knox family legacy. I had also added the cruise charges and an itemized breakdown of how long they'd been living under my roof without a lease, rent, or agreement. "I want it formal now," I said. "No more talking. I want them served." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't hesitate. "All right. Cease and desist for unauthorized use of property. Letter of revocation for shared financial access. Notification of controlled security zones. You want this overnight or digital only?" "Both," I said. "And I want a copy printed and hand-delivered. I want them to read it in their hands." "Understood." That same afternoon, I called my smart home provider. The guy on the line was chipper, the kind of tech nerd who liked to explain everything twice. I let him talk as he walked me through a full system reset, new locks, new access controls, new voice profiles. "No shared admin settings?" he asked at the end. "Nope," I said. "Just me. Biometric only." "Got it." After I hung up, I stood in the middle of my kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in from every corner. I could feel the energy in the walls shifting, like the place was finally exhaling after being held hostage. The locksmiths came by that evening. 3 of them, all from a local service I trusted. They replaced every cylinder, every deadbolt, and every keypad. I watched them work from the porch, sipping a cold bottle of water, not speaking unless they had a question. When they left, I tipped them generously and said, "Thanks for giving me my house back." I moved my bedroom to the west wing, the studio I'd renovated last year when I thought I might try painting again. It had no memories in it. No smells of someone else's perfume. No one had ever slept in that bed but me. I boxed up every family photo, every guest room knick-knack my mother had brought in. There were hand towels that said, "Family First," a driftwood sign Gareth had hung near the entry that read, "Knox Harbor," and an engraved picture frame of Thane's kids that I didn't even remember receiving. I put it all in a labeled bin and left it in the foyer. On the kitchen counter, I left a single note. Typed. Signed. This is no longer a shared space. Please direct all future contact through council. Then I walked out to the deck and stood there for a long time, watching the sea flicker with early evening light. The waves didn't care about family drama. They just kept coming. A week passed. They didn't call. Didn't text. I didn't expect them to. But I knew the day they would come back. I'd heard from a friend that Gareth and Sheila had returned from their cruise and were making their way up the coast in their rental car. I also knew they were expecting to walk into their home with shopping bags, tanned skin, and stories about international waters. The morning they arrived, I was already up. I made coffee. Checked emails. I left the front curtains open just enough to see the driveway without being obvious. At 10:03 a.m., their car pulled in. It was a sleek black SUV, new enough to smell like lease papers. I heard the doors open. Heard them laugh as they commented on how nice the flowers in the yard looked, flowers they hadn't watered once. Then came the familiar click of keys in the front lock. Silence. The lock didn't turn. Another try. Jiggling. Then a knock. Sheila's voice called out, light and sing-song. "Tamira. We're back." Nothing. Another knock, this time firmer. "Tamira." The video doorbell blinked on. A calm, automated voice said, "Access revoked. This property is now a private residence. All inquiries must be directed to the legal contact provided." I watched from the upstairs hallway monitor. Gareth frowned, looking directly at the camera. "Is this a joke?" He pulled out his phone and started dialing. My phone rang once from the kitchen, then sent him straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. Sheila paced in front of the door, her arms crossed. "She's overreacting. This is petty. This is childish." Then she banged on the door. "Tamira. You can't do this to us." The camera picked it all up. I watched them stand there like confused tenants after an eviction notice, which, in truth, they were. They eventually walked around the side of the house, trying the back door. No luck. Gareth crouched to look through the window like maybe I was sitting on the couch, just ignoring them. But I wasn't. I was upstairs, in my studio, barefoot on the cool tile, drinking green tea and finishing up an email to a new client. They rang the doorbell 3 more times. Left a few voice messages. One from Sheila was tearful. One from Gareth was furious. Then they left. But not before Gareth turned to face the security camera and muttered, "You'll regret this, girl. Family doesn't lock family out." I stood still, heart steady. Then I whispered to no one, "Then you shouldn't have tried to move in without an invitation." The morning after they stood in my driveway shouting through the doorbell, the silence felt unnatural. The house was calm, the air smelled like salt and cedar, and for the first time in weeks, I thought I might actually have peace. Then my phone buzzed. It was 7:08 a.m. I hadn't even poured coffee yet. The message came from my friend Vanessa, who never texted before noon. "Is this about you?" Attached was a link. I clicked it. The headline punched me right in the chest, entitled "Heiress Locks Out Elderly Parents from Family Home, Where Did We Go Wrong?" The article was written by a local columnist, someone I remembered from charity events years ago. She'd always adored my mother's speeches about raising strong, independent children. The piece dripped with sympathy for Gareth and Sheila Knox, two beloved retirees caught in the emotional fallout of a controlling daughter's paranoia. There was a photo, taken from the street. My parents stood on the front lawn, hands clasped, looking heartbroken. My mother's makeup perfect, eyes wide with practiced sorrow. My father's arm around her shoulder, like a grieving patriarch in a drama. The captions painted me as ungrateful, unstable, a self-made success who forgot who made her. The comments were worse. "Spoiled brat. Those poor parents. Imagine treating your elders like that." I couldn't read another line. I set the phone face down on the counter, my hands trembling. Rage is a strange thing when you've been trained to stay calm your whole life. It doesn't come out as yelling. It burns slow, deep in your ribs, like coals that refuse to go out. I called my lawyer. He picked up on the second ring. "I saw it. Can we respond?" I asked. My voice sounded too steady, like it didn't belong to me. "Not yet," he said. "Let them keep showing their hand. The more public they get, the more evidence we have for malicious intent." "I'm not sure I care about intent anymore." "I know," he said gently. "But care about winning." By noon, the article had been picked up by 3 online tabloids and a morning radio segment. People in town were talking. The real estate agent who'd helped me buy the property texted an awkward emoji. One of my former clients sent me a message that began with, "I hope this isn't true." It was like watching your reputation sink in real time, each news share pulling it deeper underwater. I thought that was bad enough, until the call that afternoon. It was supposed to be a routine investor meeting for my next project, a sustainable housing complex in Oxnard. We'd scheduled a virtual call with 2 partners and a potential investor named Alex Grant. We exchanged introductions. He seemed pleasant enough. Then, 3 minutes in, he said, "Before we dive into projections, I just need to ask, are you all right?" "Excuse me. I don't want to overstep," he said carefully, "but we saw some concerning coverage. Your name's been popping up." There it was. That polite tone people use when they're trying not to sound judgmental. I smiled, professional and calm. "You can't believe everything you read, Mr. Grant." He laughed softly. "Of course. Just wanted to clarify. Let's circle back next quarter when things quiet down." The call ended 2 minutes later. I sat staring at the reflection of my own face in the laptop screen. The cursor blinked at me like an accusation. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a forwarded email from my assistant. The subject line, "Forward, inquiry from Sheila Knox." My stomach turned before I opened it. The body of the email read, "Dear Mr. Grant, I'm reaching out as Tamira's mother. I'm concerned about her emotional state and decision-making. She's been under stress and might not be equipped to handle new projects at this time. I hope you'll be patient with her." They weren't just ruining my reputation. They were dismantling my credibility. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then something inside me settled. The fear, the humiliation, they went quiet. All that was left was clarity. If they wanted a war, they'd get one. I called my lawyer again. We're responding. He didn't argue. He just said, meet me at my office. Bring everything. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from him and my new media consultant, a composed woman named Rebecca who looked like she'd survived 5 political scandals before lunch. We build your narrative, Rebecca said. Not emotional, not angry. Just facts. I'm not interested in sympathy, I said. Good, she replied. Sympathy looks weak. Truth looks strong. We went over every piece of documentation I had, proof of ownership, bank transfers, text messages, email chains, hospital records. Even the call logs showing how many times my parents had contacted my investors behind my back. Rebecca built a timeline on the whiteboard. We release this as a video. You record it here, tonight. 90 seconds, tops. Calm. Measured. You're not attacking, you're correcting. I agreed. We set up the lights. She stood behind the camera, nodding once when we were ready. I looked straight into the lens and began. My name is Tamira Knox. I own my home. I purchased it in 2021, after 20 years of working and saving. My parents, Gareth and Sheila, have been staying with me since 2022. Recently, they attempted to transfer my property into a family trust without my consent. When I revoked their access, they went public with false claims. I'm sharing this not out of anger, but out of truth. My home was never inherited. It was earned. And no one has the right to weaponize love to steal what they didn't build. I exhaled slowly. Rebecca nodded. Perfect. We release it Sunday at noon. Let the storm build before we hit back. That night, I sat on the deck, listening to the waves crash below. The house felt both heavier and lighter at once. I thought about how many times I'd chosen silence to keep peace. Peace had always been their currency, one they expected me to pay in compliance. Not anymore. I fell asleep on the couch, laptop open beside me. When I woke, the sky was pale gray. My phone buzzed with a new text. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. Check the storage room behind the east wall. She kept everything. ER. I read it twice. ER. Eula Ross. My heart pounded. And what I found in that storage room changed everything. Even my silence. The text from Eula lingered on my phone screen long after I'd read it. Morning light was seeping into the house, sharp and colorless, the kind that doesn't invite warmth. I stared at those words, she kept everything, until the letters blurred. It took me 10 minutes to move. I walked down the hall toward the east guest room, a space I hadn't opened in months. The door gave a soft groan when I pushed it open, like the house itself was warning me to leave the past alone. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old linen. The curtains were drawn tight, and the light filtering through them was thin, almost reluctant. The closet sat flush against the wall, a piece of custom carpentry Gareth had insisted on installing back when they first moved in. It's solid, he'd said. A man needs structure. I pressed my hand along the back panel. The wood felt cool, smooth, too smooth. My nails found a seam. A push, then a click. The panel loosened just enough for me to slip my fingers in and pull. Behind it, a narrow compartment. Inside, 3 dusty banker boxes stacked neatly, labeled in thick marker, family docs, private. My pulse stumbled. I dragged the first box out, sat cross-legged on the floor, and lifted the lid. Inside were manila folders, thick with papers. I skimmed the top pages, copies of power of attorney documents, and signed but dated a year before I'd even bought the house. Garrett's handwriting was everywhere. The next folder contained a letter from his attorney outlining something called a soft transfer, describing how my property could be integrated into a family trust without causing alarm. Attached to it were emails between that lawyer and my mother, discussing how to reframe my ownership as an emotional burden I'd eventually want to release. My throat tightened. I flipped through the rest of the box. Drafts of email templates, phrased in the same tone my mother always used, half pity, half righteousness. Tamira's fragile right now. We're worried she can't manage her finances responsibly. It's not about control. It's about protection. Every page was a rehearsal for the lie they'd already started telling the world. I sank back against the wall, clutching one of the folders to my chest, my mind whirring with the weight of every word they'd written. It wasn't anger that came first, it was the silence, heavy and familiar, like I'd been bracing for this all along. I opened the second box. More paperwork, but near the bottom, tucked between stacks of printouts, was a yellow sticky note, the ink faded. She kept this from you. I didn't know until now. I'm sorry. Eula Ross. My breath caught. I stared at the note, tracing the edges with my thumb. Eula. The woman who dusted every shelf, scrubbed every countertop, smiled gently even when my parents barked orders at her. She'd seen more of this house than anyone, more of me than anyone. And she'd known. I closed the box, stood slowly, and walked downstairs. The house was still quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I put the kettle on. As the water heated, I pulled out 2 mugs. I wasn't sure why I did it at first. Maybe instinct. Maybe habit. Then I texted Eula, "Can you come by? Tea's ready." She arrived 20 minutes later, her eyes red-rimmed, her hair tucked into a scarf. She looked smaller somehow, or maybe it was that I was seeing her without the uniform of work between us. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured the tea. She didn't touch hers. "I didn't mean for you to find out like that," she said quietly. "I'm glad I did." Eula twisted the edge of a napkin in her hands. "Your mother. She made me promise to keep it secret. Said it was family business. Said if I spoke out, she'd ruin me." I believed her. I kept my voice even. "How long have you known?" "Since last year." She had me scan papers, shred old files. But I saw the drafts, the letters. I didn't understand at first. Then I overheard them one night, talking to Thane. She was coaching him on what to say if social services ever called, how to sound convincing if someone thought you were unstable. Eula's voice broke. "I should have told you. I'm so sorry." I watched her fingers shake as she reached for her tea. I could feel the part of me that used to crave justice stirring, but it wasn't fury that came this time. It was something quieter, something steadier. "You don't owe me an apology," I said softly. "You were surviving. We all were." She looked at me through tears. "What are you going to do?" I handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, 3 months' salary, paid in full. "Take this. Leave the state for a while. Be free of this house. Of us." Her lips trembled. "You're a good woman, Tamira." "No," I said. "I'm just done being the quiet one." When she left, I stood at the window and watched her car pull out of the drive. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to wave. Later that night, I went upstairs to the storage boxes again. The weight of them felt different now, less like secrets, more like evidence. I carried them to my study and stacked them neatly in the corner. Then I reached for the old photo albums my mother had insisted we keep on the top shelf. Inside one of them, beneath the plastic sleeves of family vacations and holiday dinners, I found a slim, yellowing envelope sealed with red wax. My name was written on the front in a handwriting I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, Calder Marshall. My grandfather. My heart skipped. He died 10 years ago. I broke the seal carefully. The paper inside was fragile, the ink faded but legible. His words were written in deliberate strokes, each line steady and sure. If you're reading this, someone's trying to make you feel small. Don't let them. You were born with a breath they never understood. Keep it. Own it. I read that line 3 times. Then once more, aloud, my voice barely above a whisper. I sat there in the half-dark, holding the letter against my chest. He'd seen it coming, somehow, the way this family devoured its own peace, the way love became leverage. For the first time since this all began, I felt something close to clarity. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about ending the cycle. The next morning, the sea was loud. The air smelled like rain. I walked outside barefoot, the deck cold under my feet. The tide was high, crashing against the bluff. I held my phone up, hit record, and started speaking, not to my parents, not to the press, but to myself. I forgive you, I said quietly. But I won't forget what I've rebuilt to survive you. I stopped recording and watched as the video saved, then set the phone down on the railing. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I felt released. The wind came off the ocean, wild and clean, and somewhere inside that noise, I could almost hear Calder's voice again, steady, proud, reminding me that breath is life, and I'd finally taken mine back. And the world, watching, would finally see whose name was really on the door. The video went live on a Sunday, just as the fog began lifting off the coast. I didn't post it on my personal account. I let the consultant's media team handle everything, captioned, compressed, and cross-shared across platforms. No theatrics. No ambient music. Just my voice, the plain white background of my studio, and a truth that didn't need dressing up. By midday, it was everywhere. The views climbed quietly at first, 5,000, then 20, then past 100,000 by late afternoon. The comments were steady, a current of disbelief that slowly turned to outrage on my behalf. She never raised her voice once. This is what dignity under pressure looks like. She earned that house. You don't get to just rewrite ownership because you don't like who owns it. I didn't read them all. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to gauge what people thought of me. I wasn't curating sympathy or spinning a narrative. I had said what needed saying. Gareth and Sheila had no idea the video was coming. When they found out, probably through one of their friends from church, they didn't call. But that same evening, the same tabloid that had smeared me with that, entitled Heiress, garbage posted a formal retraction. A single paragraph, small and tucked beneath the weekend lifestyle section. We regret our earlier coverage of Tamira Knox, which failed to reflect the factual ownership and legal standing of the property in question. We apologize for any confusion or harm caused. No signature. No names. Just a folded flag of embarrassment they hoped I wouldn't wave back. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to. Let them sit with the quiet echo of their own backpedal. The next morning, my attorney called. I was already in the middle of slicing apples for a tart when he said, "They've withdrawn the petition." I wiped my hands on a dish towel. Both of them. Yes. Filed through separate attorneys. They released a joint statement. Want to hear it? Sure. He read it aloud, slow and deliberate. Our intention was never harm. We now recognize our daughter's autonomy. We look forward to healing and reflection. I leaned against the counter, the knife still warm from my hand. That's rich. You want to respond. No. I want them to live with what they did, not hide behind what they said. He didn't push. You want to move forward with defamation. No lawsuits. No headlines. I've said what I needed to say. There was a pause. Then he said, "You already won, Tamira." I ended the call, but his words lingered. That afternoon, I met Thane for coffee at the same cafe we used to go to in college. He looked older than I remembered, sharper in the jaw, a little more tired around the eyes. He hugged me when he arrived. I let him. But I didn't return it fully. We sat outside. It was a clear day, the kind that made tourists fall in love with this coast. He stirred his coffee, then finally said, "I should have said something sooner." I sipped mine. Let him sit with the silence. "I didn't know how deep it went," he added. "You didn't want to know," I said. He didn't deny it. "I was afraid if I spoke up, I'd lose them too." "You didn't lose them. You just watched them try to lose me." He nodded. "I'm sorry." I didn't answer right away. The breeze picked up, fluttering the napkins on our table. Then I said, "Thanks. But you watched it all happen." We finished our drinks. No grand reconciliation. No hugs at the end. Just a simple, quiet handshake before we went our separate ways. That night, as I was closing the living room windows, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Eula. "The house feels lighter now." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed back. "So do I." The days that followed were simple. I didn't take on any new projects. I didn't return every email. I let the quiet fill the house again, not the kind that chokes, but the kind that heals. I took long walks by the cliffs. I cooked for myself, not for guests. I played the old piano in the music room just to hear what it sounded like when it didn't have to compete with someone else's voice. And one evening, just before sunset, I walked barefoot through the house. Not rushing. Not searching. Just moving. I touched the walls like they were old friends. I stopped in the hallway where Gareth had once hung that ridiculous Knox Harbor sign. It wasn't there anymore. Just a faint outline, a shadow of where it used to be. I paused by the foyer, where I'd once watched strangers walk in like they belonged. There was no one there now. Just me. I climbed the stairs to the studio, sat by the window facing the ocean, and pulled the letter from Calder from its envelope one more time. I read it slowly. Line by line. His handwriting steady, even in age. "You were born with a breath they never understood. Keep it. Own it." And I had. I didn't need applause. I didn't need anyone to say I was right. The walls knew. The floor knew. The locks knew. And more importantly, I knew. The sun dipped lower. The ocean caught its color. I got up, walked to the front door, and locked it from the inside. I turned off the porch light. And for the first time in years, I slept. Because being alone in my house was never the tragedy. It was the proof I had finally come home, to myself. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who chip away at your identity piece by piece, until you no longer recognize yourself in your own home. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about boundaries. About reclaiming what was never theirs to take. Have you ever had to draw a line with family? And keep it drawn? If this hit close to home, share your thoughts in the comments,